Hey, what episode are we doing today? It's the fish episode, right?
No, it's not the fish episode. It's the St. Patrick's Day episode.
What? We're making shepherd's pie. Ole, 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 ole. Alright, before we start cooking, we gotta shave though. Ah, I feel so much better now. And you gotta put this butte down. You know, I don't want to burn her or anything like that while we're cooking. And then we gotta get just a little bit looser. Now we're ready to cook. All right, so for today's episode for the shepherd's pie, you're gonna want white onion, garlic, carrots, some sort of ground meat. Here I have ground beef, so technically this is a cottage pie. Shepherd's pie is with ground lamb, but you know, ground lamb is expensive. This was $3 for all of this. If this was ground lamb, it would have cost like 16. So we're broke out here. Flour, salt, pepper, thyme, rosemary, and chives. The chives are optional. They're just to make it look pretty when it's done. Beef stock, some heavy cream, Irish cheddar. You're not doing it right if you don't use Irish cheddar, okay? You can use regular cheddar or white cheddar, but you want to use Irish if you want to do it right. Looking at you. Eggs, tomato paste, and obviously Irish butter. This should not be a problem to get. It's in literally every grocery store. Get the Irish butter for literally everything. It is so much better than regular butter. So, to get this started, we're gonna start with our carrots. I'm just gonna grab 3 or so from our bundle here and cut them off their stems. And then I'm gonna wash them. Hang on, I gotta mention the mashed potatoes. And you're also gonna want mashed potatoes. Now, I'm not gonna show you how to make these today. You can go and watch our mashed potato episode to see how I'm gonna make those. But you're gonna wanna make those ahead of time, okay? All right. So, now that we have our carrots, you wanna give these a nice chop, or a nice fine dice. So I'm gonna cut off the ends. I'm gonna come lengthwise along the carrot and cut them into nice little planks. Ooh, shit. All right, so now that we've recovered from the accident, we're gonna keep cutting. We're gonna be more careful this time. So I'm gonna cut all the carrots into little planks like this. Kind of stack them all up. So if you cut yourself in the kitchen, which is bound to happen eventually if you cook at all, you know, it's real important that you clean up afterwards. You know, wash your knife, you know, make sure no blood got in the food, you know, wash your hands, you know, bandage that up because you don't want to keep bleeding all over everything that you cooked, you know, or that you're cooking. Because sure, you can get plenty of iron that way, but it's also not very sanitary. So clean up if you cut yourself. All right, so now we've got all our carrots cut up into little planks. I'm just gonna kind of stack them up. And we're just gonna give them a rough chop. This doesn't have to be super precise or anything like that, you know. The carrots are adding some sweetness to the pie and also a little bit of crunchy texture in there. So it's really up to you. If you don't like the texture of carrots a lot, you can mince them up finer. But I like carrots, so I'm gonna leave them rough. All right, we got all our carrots cut up. We're gonna set those aside. next thing we're gonna do, we're gonna dice up our onion. So for onions, you're gonna start by cutting it in half. Put one half off to the side. Peel off this outer layer real quick. I'm getting down deeper a little bit because this onion had a bruise, but the layers underneath it are still good. So when you're cutting an onion, you're gonna cut it the same way that we cut the shallots for the Beef Wellington episode, but I'll go over it again. So with the onion, the part that makes you cry is when you leave the root intact over here. So you're gonna leave that on, or the root makes you cry, right? So you're gonna leave that intact. So we're gonna leave that on over here. We're gonna take this onion, we're gonna cut it in half again. So we've got this little quarter. We're gonna go about halfway. We're gonna cut like that. Be very careful with this, where you'll cut yourself again. Turn it, and then very shallow cuts along the onion, but do not go all the way through. Do not go all the way to the top of the root. You want to make sure all this hangs onto the root. So we got those cuts in. Now we're just gonna come through here. Boom, you got diced onion. So we're gonna do that for the whole onion. All right, so we got all our onions done. So we're gonna just set those aside really quickly. Now, we're gonna chop the garlic. All right, so you guys should know how to cut garlic already. I do it in literally every episode. So, you know, now's your time to show off to all your friends and family if you do the little trick that I do when I do it. All right, so we got that nice and minced. We're just gonna leave that piled up on the board here. And we're gonna start by browning our carrots and our onions with the garlic. So we're gonna start by throwing our garlic in. And we're gonna throw our carrots in. And our onions. Hit them with the 80s hip hop band. We're just gonna saute those a little bit until they get soft. So maybe like a minute, 2 minutes, not very long. All right, so now that those are nice and soft, I'm gonna push them to the side a little bit. Make some space. We're gonna throw our meat in. Salt and pepper. We're gonna break it up and then we're gonna brown it a little bit. Again, if you don't cook this all the way through right now, that's fine because we're gonna be baking it anyways. I'm gonna start mixing the carrots and the onions back in with the rest of the beef, just so I get a little bit more room in the pan and let those flavors get to know each other. Now I'm gonna pop a lid on this just to help speed up the cooking. putting a lid on there does is it just traps all that heat and helps the beef and the onions and the carrots and all that cook a little bit faster, you know? Because we're not going for a brown or for the meat to look super good on this, because it's all gonna be inside the pie when we're done with it. So you just wanna make sure it's nice and brown, nice and kind of roasty on there. So I'll let that go for a minute. While that's going, I'm gonna go ahead and measure out about a cup and a half beef stock. All right, so this has all gotten nice and brown. So I'm just gonna take just a little bit of flour, not any precise measurement, just sprinkle that over the top. It's gonna help all this emulsify. Also gonna add in maybe an ounce or so of tomato paste. Kind of mix that all up. As you're cooking this, if this all still feels, you know, kind of loose or whatever, feel free to add more flour. Because we want this to end up kind of having like a thick gravy consistency to it. Okay, so we've got that nice and mixed up. I'm gonna add in my cup of beef stock. Give another nice little stir. And I'm actually gonna add just a little bit more flour to this. And just another small glug of tomato paste. Get that all nice and mixed up together. Now I'm going to crank the heat up to high and let this reduce until it gets nice and thick. In the meantime, while that's reducing, I'm going to go ahead and grate some of our Irish cheddar. So with the cheddar, you're just gonna, there's no precise amount, you know. You're just gonna want enough to cover and kind of sprinkle across the top of your pie once you get ready to bake it. So I'm gonna rock with about this amount. All right, so this is reduced down, and we can tell because we run our spoon through it, leaves a nice clean line. So we're gonna pull this off the heat over here. And we're just gonna dump it into our pan, whatever that may be, that we're gonna be making shepherd's pie in. And when you're doing this, you want to make sure you get all those nice little burn bits too, because those are gonna have some flavor that you're not gonna taste the burnt once it's inside the actual pie. Now you're just gonna want to spread it out kind of inside your pan. My pan is a little too big for the amount that we made, but that's fine, we'll make it work. The biggest thing is that you want to just make sure that you have a nice even kind of layer across the whole. Alright, so now that we got that all nice and patted down, now we're gonna add on our mashed potatoes. So, with the mashed potatoes, you can just kind of plop them on there and smooth them out, but I'm gonna do a little piping bag trick. Just make it come out a little bit nicer. So I'm just gonna take a plastic bag and dump my mashed potatoes into there. All right, so I've got all my mashed potatoes in the bag here. Doesn't that look delicious? We'll force them out of this corner right here. Give it a little snip. And we're just gonna pipe them on here. It's really freaking hot. Give me 1 second. This idea worked a lot better in my head. All right, and then your magical idea that you thought it was gonna look really cool in your cooking show isn't working out, so you're just gonna open the bag and get a rubber spatula and do it the normal way. Then you're just gonna kind of smooth those out across the top. And then since we're only doing half this pan, I'm also gonna put some on the side over here. Just to form a kind of little barrier. We got all our potatoes nice and packed in there. We're gonna take some of our cheese and just sprinkle that over the top. All right, then the last thing we're gonna do before this goes in the oven, we're just gonna grab a sprig of rosemary. This one's really full. Just pull some little leaves off, sprinkle that over the top, and then we're gonna do the same with the thyme. This is gonna give us some nice aromatics. That's the word they teach you in culinary school. I didn't go to culinary school. I went to culinary school with the street. Chef Boyardee's good. Alright, then I'm just gonna throw the used stems in the same pan to allow it to kind of perfume the pie as it bakes. Okay, and now this is going in a 375-degree oven for 20 to 25 minutes, just until you start to see some nice color coming over the mashed potatoes on the top. Theoretically, all this is already cooked, so your time is kind of, you can play with your time a little bit. You know, if you like your potatoes to be less brown, put it in there for less. If you want them to be more brown, leave them in there a little longer. So I'll put those in now. And now we wait. All right, so it's been about 20-25 minutes. We're gonna take shepherd's pie out of the oven now. We're gonna do our taste test. Oh wait, look at that. Fell apart a little bit, you know, that's because our pan wasn't the exact size we needed. But, you know, you had a smaller pan or you made more, this would look amazing. Smells amazing. But real quick, before we dig into it, we're just gonna chop a couple chives real quick. Sprinkle those over it. All right, now it's time to plate these veg pieces over here. Oh yeah. There's our shepherd's pie. Alright, so now we're gonna take a bite. That's the perfect Irish dish. It's everything you want. It's just meat, potatoes, with a little bit of vegetables. It is so savory. It's like you're changing something. What's happening? Ole, 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 ole. Thanks for coming to this week's episode of Cooking in College. Like, subscribe, make this dish. Ole, 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 ole. Oh, wow. Okay, I'm alive.